we're seeing TMac somewhere in the top 20, but a lot of times, it's 10 through 20. I've seen him a little bit outside the top 20 as well. That is shocking to me, all that to say. Like, I think this dude's an absolute stud.
All right, we're here with my guy, Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus. Trevor, how are you doing today?
Saul, it's good to be with you, my friend. Appreciate you having me.
Appreciate the time as always. Listen, you guys have TMac as graded as your number 3 overall prospect on your big board, the top wide receiver in the country. Obviously, we know him down in Tucson and in U of A land, if you will, in terms of his exploits. But what is your overall assessment in terms of his ceiling and where he could possibly go in this year's NFL draft to whatever team he ends up landing?
It's funny. Some people, myself included, sort of have the luxury to do NFL draft studying year round. And there are a lot of other great football analysts who, whether they have to cover college football as a primary or the NFL as a primary, it takes them a little bit of time to sort of like get around to draft prospects. And it felt as though TMac was a consensus sort of like top 10 pick in a lot of the early mock drafts that we saw in September, October, November, and even December, things like that. And now that we're getting some more mock drafts, and now we're sort of getting into the season where, okay, maybe you're doing mocks a little bit less with your eyes and maybe more with your ears, what you are hearing. We're seeing TMac somewhere in the top 20, but a lot of times, it's 10 through 20. I've seen him a little bit outside the top 20 as well. That is shocking to me, all that to say. Like, I think this dude's an absolute stud. Is he the fastest player in the world? No, but I mean, like, you've got to understand exactly what he is bringing to the table. Great size, elite hands, and what I love about him is great yards after catch ability with that size. A lot of people compare him to Mike Evans, and I'm from just south of Tampa, so I've watched a lot of Mike Evans in my time as a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, and I love Mike. He's fantastic, if you ask me, Hall of Famer in the future. But one thing that Mike doesn't really do super well is give you that yards after catch. Guys like an AJ Green, who are sort of similar builds to a Mike Evans, a Tetairoa McMillan, he gave you a little bit more after the catch. Now, I'm not quite saying he's like a Julio Jones after the catch or a Calvin Johnson after the catch, but man, you talk about what could be for this guy at the NFL level. My pro comp for him is AJ Green, is that all pro type of receiver. And I think he just brings so much to the table. I think he's great within his routes. Of course, he's not as fluid as a guy who might be a foot, smaller than he would be, but for his size, I think anytime you talk about some of his deficiencies, for his size, he still brings a good amount of ability to that area, even if it's sort of a quote unquote weakness. And what he does well with his size, fluidity, the spectacular catching, the catching through contact, all of that, man, it's just at an elite level. So I am surprised to see some mock drafts out there with Tetairoa McMillan anywhere outside of the top 15, because I think this dude's an absolute stud.
You talked about, him possibly dropping because of people and what they're hearing and all that stuff. And I think sometimes people get a little fatigued in mock draft season, even this early on, right? And we haven't even hit the combine. We haven't hit the interview section. These guys, a lot of these guys haven't even met with teams yet because they're the higher profile prospects. In TMac, when you watch him on tape, what is the thing that you immediately go to in terms of like why he should be considered a top 10 draft pick?
Well, I go back to, honestly, it's the yards after catch mentality. You get a lot of wide receivers who are built like him. Obviously, like, I think that he's top tier percentile, even just for big wide receivers. But it's the fact that, okay, he might make a really nice contested catch. He might make a catch over the middle. Okay, you love to see that from a big body X type of a wide receiver, a guy who knows how to get off press coverage, who's very comfortable hand fighting, even at the catch point and throughout the routes. So like all of that, you would think should exist for an NFL bigger X wide receiver anyways. But the reason why he's a top 10 prospect and in my top 5 is because in those instances where, let's say somebody's playing off coverage on him, whether it's a cover 3, a quarters, whatever, they're just playing off on him, and he gives you a little quick slant, they'll get the ball in his hands, and then it's his mentality to become a playmaker after the catch that I absolutely love. It's not just the fact that, all right, I got green grass in front of me, I'm going to take a couple of yards here, and then I'm going to tuck the ball, I'm going to go down, or I'm going to go down a little bit early, whatever. Like, this guy's trying to get as much yards after catch as he possibly can. He truly becomes a playmaker, and that part of his game is what allows him to stand out, and is why it's, to me, it should be easy to fall in love with his game, because he not only gives you the big receiver stuff, he also then gives you the above and beyond, things that you don't normally see in those bigger receivers. So exactly what you want to see from him as an X wide receiver, the strength on the line of scrimmage, getting off press, hand fighting, contested catchability, ability to go up over the middle, all of that exists in his tape. And then he gives you the bonus stuff as well as a plus athlete.
Well, you knew where we were about to go after this, right? So we talked about the good stuff and what really stands out. But there's probably another reason why maybe some people are knocking him down and considering him not a top 10 pick. Sometimes, even seeing him projected to go somewhere between 15 to 20, as you even said in terms of 10 to 20. What are those things that might give a little bit of caution to teams before they pick somebody like TMac, and are they improvable?
So I think that the big area in which if you want to knock him where you actually have some credence is the lack of separation ability. And again, when you sort of understand what you're looking at here, I don't think he's a bad separator for a player who is of his size, but 40th percentile in terms of separation versus single coverage. He's got a slender build to him, so he's a little bit, you could push him off of his route a little bit easier. You could stick with him a little bit easier. So I think those two things are the ones that you probably bring to the table of, okay, his longer, more slender build. Do you believe he's going to be durable enough? Do you think that he's physical enough to survive and not get hurt and stay healthy at the pro level? And then I think that some evaluators, some teams, they just prioritize separation skills. And if that's what you're looking for with T-Mac, he can give you some of that with his savviness as a route runner. But overall, he's not going to be this quick stop on a dime type of accelerator guy who's really going to create a separation window every time he puts his foot in the ground and breaks on a route. So to me, that's pretty much the only things that you could look at and say, yeah, I guess this isn't something that I would gravitate towards here. Can he get better at that? Sure. I think the more he plays the game, the more he gets comfortable at the pro level with speed and everything, and how he can learn to set cornerbacks up, whatever leverage they're playing, and making sure that he can maximize any space that they're giving him. He can get a little bit better at that, but he's never going to be a Lad McConkey. He's never going to be a Justin Jefferson in terms of like these elite separator guys. And so I think there are just some teams and some evaluators that prioritize that sort of separation a little bit more. And if you do, I can understand why you get a little bit of hesitancy with a taller guy like Tetairoa McMillan. But to me, I think he's a fine separator, certainly when you look at everything else that he brings to the table.
Now I'm going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit because listen, you've seen every single prospect, it feels like, for the better part of a decade, and plus. When you're looking at guys, let's just take people from the known to the unknown, okay? People that are not familiar with T-Mac, like we are. When you look at somebody like, let's just say, a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a Puka Nacua. Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously, we're familiar with him in Arizona because we've seen him play. Had some ups and downs last year in terms of the expectation versus the actual output, but still a quality year, almost 1,000 yards receiving for the Arizona Cardinals. And then Puka Nacua, a prospect that not a lot of people knew about coming out. Obviously, he went off the charts in year one. Year two, you see the clear talent, but also not a burner, not somebody that's going to take the top off the defense. When you look at those two particular prospects comparatively to T-Mac, is there a good relation there between those two, or how far off or how close is he to either one?
Yeah, I would say that he's closest to Marvin Harrison Jr. If you were to say like, okay, who would you rather take? I thought that Marvin was one of the best players in last year's NFL draft class. I could still say that even from a quote unquote down rookie year, which is hilarious that we say that about a guy who I still think had a good rookie season. I think Tet would be close, honestly. I think that with the grades that I have in my head and the film grades that I gave these guys, I still would have Marvin Harrison Jr. a little bit above where I have Tetairoa McMillan, but it's really not that far off. I think both of those guys are on the line of scrimmage, winning through contested catchability, elite hands, elite catching ability, whether it's with one or two hands. You can play at the sideline very reliably, and they've got enough speed to at least threaten vertically at all times, even if they aren't burners. So I would say that their profile is a little bit closer than Nacua, who, man, it's so hard to comp anybody to Puka Nacua because, to be honest with you, he's a fine athlete. He's a bigger, stronger receiver, and you like that about him, but he is so successful because he wants to be. Like the worker mentality that he has, the chemistry that he has with Matthew Stafford. And, there are stories of when Nacua got to the Los Angeles Rams, how he was basically Cooper Kupp's shadow, right? And this is a guy who had over 2,000 yards receiving one season. Cooper Kupp is one of those guys who he's open at all times, not because he's necessarily more athletic than everybody that he's going to go up against, but because he understands how to win at the position better than basically anybody. And Puka Nacua, when he got drafted, he tells a story of, he basically said, like, I'm going to be attached to your hip, to Cooper Kupp. He's like, I want to learn absolutely everything about you, how you go about the game, how you are as good as you are. And I think that we're seeing a reflection of that in his game. So for me, Nacua is so much more savviness and football IQ and things like that. Not that he's not an NFL athlete, he clearly is, but it's always hard for me to comp anybody to Nacua just because of the way that he wins. Is just how he processes the game at an elite level.
For sure. Final question for the TMac side of things. When you look at fit, when you look at just the overall organization, obviously we've seen Tennessee, Carolina, Raiders even rumored to be interested in TMac. What would be the ideal situation or the ideal team that you would like to see TMac go to in order to be able to maximize his growth as a wide receiver?
Man, there's a couple of teams that obviously fit for him. We don't exactly know who's going to play quarterback in New York, but well, I should say the Jets when I say New York specifically. But getting to pair him with Garrett Wilson, I think could be really fun as a 1-2 combo. Those guys are a little bit different, but I think that having both those young guys on the roster as two of the best young receivers in the game, it could be a lot of fun. Honestly, the spot that I think he could have the most production with is New England, because if he goes to the New England Patriots at number 4, he is immediately Drake May's number 1 wide receiver. And as Drake May continues to evolve and improve, Tetairoa McMillan is going to be right there for him. I absolutely believe that a 1,000-yard season as a rookie is right there and definitely achievable for him if he goes to the New England Patriots. So those are the two that really come to my mind immediately. Certainly, like Carolina, I think they don't need just any type of a wide receiver. They need a wide receiver 1. So I think that Tet still makes sense for them. The New Orleans Saints potentially as well, with the injuries and the concussions to Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed coming off the injury as well. Marquez Valdes-Scantling not under contract. So those are a handful of spots that I think could make a ton of sense. But now that I'm sort of thinking about it and going down the list, I'll throw Dallas in there as well. Him and CeeDee Lamb in that offense, as potent as it has been in the last couple of years, we really saw it was basically just the CeeDee Lamb show last year. But with Lamb fully healthy, with Dak Prescott hopefully fully healthy, and if you threw Tetairoa McMillan in there as well, I think that could make for a lot of production. So I would say my favorite landing spots, after sort of talking it out loud there with you, New England and Dallas for Tet.
Well, if he went to New England, obviously we've seen successful Arizona Wildcats in New England before with Gronk. If he goes to Dallas, I will throw up personally, but cool for everybody else. And that goes out to my DLS guys out in Cowboy Land. So listen, Trevor, we really do appreciate you, giving your insight on TMac and his growth to the next level. And you make sure you can follow Trevor Sikkema on Twitter and all their channels. And you're doing live TV now. I saw you last night on Believe. Just fantastic work all the way around. I appreciate you very much.
I appreciate it, Saul. Anytime, my friend. Thank you for having me.